better and more efficiently, although I think the take-up that I've spoken to speaks to their success. What I will not do is allow any of the protections that exist within our scheme to be eroded, because, as we've seen with some schemes in the rest of the UK, that can leave customers out of pocket and with damaging installations having been made in their homes.
Thank you. Grateful of colleagues joining the meeting. We're to do so quietly. I call Finlay Carson at question number 6.
To ask the Scottish Government how its draft budget 26-27 will ensure meaningful infrastructure improvements in the south of Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Shona Robertson.
The draft budget includes investment to facilitate the installation of railway electrification infrastructure on sections of the Borders line and to complete the new Dumfries High School. Across the south of Scotland, it will support delivery of affordable homes, around 2.5 hectares of woodland creation, 268 hectares of peatland restoration and a new water treatment works in Borland. Through the growth in city region deals, it ensures work continues to create a 113-mile walking and cycling trail connecting Berwick-upon-Tweed to Moffat, and it promotes growth by developing new fit-for-purpose business units in Tweedbank.
Finlay Carson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the response. I welcome this week's announcement of £1.1 million ground investigation contracts for the Springhome and Crocketford bypass project, a clear escalation of proprietary work. However, communities want clarity on the financial direction of travel, not just technical studies. Can the Cabinet Secretary confirm in unequivocal terms whether full dualling of the bypass remains a funded and actively supported option within the Government? And can she set out precisely what formal engagement her government has had with the UK Government regarding the budgeting, cost-sharing and assessment of the dualling option, so we can understand whether the necessary financial structures are in place?
Cabinet Secretary.
So let me first say, of course, there is a specific reference to the A75 and the A77 road improvements, including the Springhome and Crocketford bypasses project within the new infrastructure delivery pipeline, which was published on the 13th of January. Is included with the development pipeline of the IPD, which relates to those projects with an outlined business case and development, and those being further defined. I'm pleased that Finlay Carson welcomed the £1.1 million of ground investigation works contract. I can tell him that the design and assessment work to consider options for realigning the trunk road with bypasses at the villages is well underway and proceeding at pace. And of course we welcome the announcement from the UK Government is committed funding for the remainder of the current study that will enable us to complete the initial work to consider improvements to this key route at Springhome and Crocketford, and identified a preferred route option by early 2027.
Question number 7, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it plans to continue providing funding to any organisations that challenge the judgment in the For Women Scotland versus the Scottish Minister's case.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville.
The Equality, Inclusion and Human Rights Fund supports a range of civil society organisations that deliver work focused on tackling inequality and discrimination, furthering equality and advancing the realisation of human rights in Scotland. Organisations must fulfil and meet their obligations under the grant requirements in place for that fund. Each organisation must deliver against their agreed obligations, and these are monitored via a biannual process of reports and quarterly finance reports on funded services.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. Various organisations have recently sought to reverse the implementation of single-sex spaces, ignoring the crystal-clear ruling by the Supreme Court last year and, in turn, the rule of law. Yet the Scottish Government insists on still funding them. Meanwhile, 10 months on, and the SNP have still failed to ensure that its public bodies are fully following that judgment, leading to costly legal challenges at the expense of the taxpayer. Will the Scottish Government finally issue an apology to women and girls in Scotland for their failure to fully implement this judgment? And will the SNP Government finally ensure that any body or organisation it funds is committed to providing single-sex spaces?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I reiterate once again, Presiding Officer, that the Scottish Government does accept the Supreme Court judgment and is implementing it. I would point out that the schemes that Sharon Dowie are referring to are helplines. befriending organisations, community engagement. And can I refer her to the recent hate crime statistics, which just came out on the 17th of February, which pointed to hate crimes against race, sexual orientation, disability, religion and transgender, as well as the ongoing challenges we have around misogyny. So while the Tories will stoke up division, Presiding Officer, I am proud that the Scottish Government will continue to promote and protect equality and human rights throughout Scotland for everyone.
Thank you. Question number 8. Question number 8, Elena Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide further details on the support provided to NHS boards to develop specialist care pathways for postural tachycardia syndrome.
Minister Marie Todd.
We expect NHS boards to provide safe, person-centred care for people with postural tachycardia syndrome. Whilst responsibility for specific clinical pathways lies with NHS boards, we've allocated more than £137 million to boards this year to help tackle the longest waits for appointments and procedures. This includes over £500,000 for cardiology and £500,000 for neurology, the specialties that are most likely to support people with postural tachycardia syndrome. I have every sympathy with postural tachycardia syndrome patients and the challenges that they face. We want patients to receive all of the support that they are entitled to.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Minister for her answer. Constituents of Carrickmillock and Doon Valley who have or suspect they have POTS have no dedicated care pathway provided by NHS Ayrshire and Arran, meaning many are being misdiagnosed and often end up using A&E to try and manage their much misunderstood condition. Now, I accept that these decisions are made at board level, but could I ask what more the Scottish Government could do to support the creation of dedicated POTS care pathways alongside the training of healthcare professionals?
Minister.
Thank you for raising the concerns of constituents in Carrickmillock and Doon Valley. Whilst NHS boards are responsible for local service configuration, the Scottish Government is supporting improvements in the recognition, diagnosis and management of POTS. Alongside the increased waiting times investment, we've provided £4.5 million in recurring funding to strengthen services for long COVID and ME CFS. Those are conditions often linked with POTS. We also work closely with NHS Education for Scotland to enhance clinical knowledge of autonomic dysfunction, fatigue and related conditions, providing training and resources to support earlier identification and better management of conditions like POTS. And that's complemented by accessible NHS informed guidance for both clinicians and patients.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. And at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Before I start, I want to make clear that I fully understand the law relating to live criminal proceedings. John Swinney should also understand the law, so I'd urge him not to hide behind it, to avoid answering my questions, which have nothing to do with matters before the court. On January the 19th, John Swinney received a private briefing from the Lord Advocate. It contained details of charges against Nicola Sturgeon's husband and the former SNP Chief Executive, Peter Murrow. This information was kept from the media and the public. 31 minutes after receiving this information, John Swinney passed it to his most senior SNP spin doctor. Why?
First Minister.
President, so let me make clear that I understand the importance of protecting live criminal proceedings. That is exactly why the Lord Advocate sent me a minute to warn me about the risk of contempt of court on a significant criminal case. And it is abundantly clear I would be asked about that case in court. She did this in order to ensure I did not prejudice the proceedings. The very brief minute that was sent to me by the Lord Advocate, which of course is a type of communication that I received from the Lord Advocate on a number of occasions, was issued to the people in the government who have to speak on my behalf. So if it's important that I am reminded by the Lord Advocate that I must be careful and respect the live criminal proceedings, then it is equally vital that those people who are authorised to speak on my behalf have the same information.
Absolutely. Russell Finlay.
The reason John Swinney passed sensitive information from the Lord Advocate to his SNP spin doctor is obvious. It was because he knew that it gave him and his party a political advantage in an election year. Thanks to the Lord Advocate, John Swinney and the SNP knew the precise scale of the alleged crime, while the public knew nothing. Mr Swinney was also given key information about potential timescales, also concealed from the public. Yesterday, the Lord Advocate claimed that she briefed John Swinney so that he didn't say anything to jeopardise the case. John Swinney says he accepts this, but her explanation is simply not credible. But if it really was about preventing any risk to the case, who else did John Swinney share this information with?
First Minister.
Well, the Government has answered a Freedom of Information request on time to address exactly the point that Mr Finlay has put to me. And the reason, and I want to repeat the reason, why that information was shared with a limited number of people in the Government is because those individuals act on my behalf and they have to know the information that I am privy to so that they also do not jeopardise the live proceedings. Now, Mr Finlay has made a number of comments which are frankly contemptible, utterly contemptible. And on the radio this morning, a prominent KC was asked, Mr Thomas Kerr, was asked what to make of the issues that were raised in Parliament yesterday.
Let's hear one another.
And this is what... Sorry, Mr Thomas Ross, my apologies. So Mr Thomas Ross, and he said, I thought it was an absolute disgrace. I mean, the current Lord Advocate has practised at the Scottish Bar for 40 years. She has a stellar career. She is trusted by every practising lawyer and every judge in the country. And for her to be accused of corruption without a shred of evidence to support it was one of the most shameful episodes I've seen in that building. It was a shameful episode. Russell Finlay was responsible and he should be ashamed of himself for what he has said.
Russell Finlay.
Imagine boasting about getting an FOI answered on time. Absolutely desperate. And it sounds like, because he didn't answer the question, it sounds like he didn't share this information with his entire Cabinet, but he shared it with his spin doctor. The Lord Advocate should have known that handing politically advantageous information about an acutely sensitive criminal case involving Nicola Sturgeon's husband to the SNP leader was a gross misjudgment. The Lord Advocate was appointed by Nicola Sturgeon and retained by both Humza Yousaf and John Swinney. As a member of SNP government, she's supposed to be scrupulously politically neutral. And I will say it again, in the real world, this smacks of corruption. And it once again highlights...
Let's hear one another.
This once again highlights the inherent conflict of interest with Scotland's top prosecutor also being a member of the Scottish Government. John Swinney stood on a manifesto promise to address this. 5 years later, nothing has changed. I wonder why. Does John Swinney now agree that the Lord Advocate's dual role must now end?
First Minister.
Before I address that point, I want to say something very directly to Mr Finlay, to Parliament and to the public in Scotland. Dorothy Bain is an outstanding prosecutor. Yes. She is an outstanding lawyer. She has 40 years of unimpeachable service to the public interest in Scotland. She alone is responsible for more cases of sexual violence of men against women being brought to justice than any other person, and I put on record today my absolute confidence in the Lord Advocate in undertaking her duties.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I am disgusted by the way Russell Finlay spoke about her yesterday, and he should be ashamed of himself and he should withdraw every word of contemptible rubbish that he's put on the record yesterday and today.
Thank you. Let's continue. Thank you.
The Government took forward, was elected on a policy commitment to explore and examine and consult on the issues in relation to the dual functions of the Lord Advocate. Those issues, of course, have been considered, but research work has been undertaken and it awaits decisions amongst ministers. But I point out...
Let us hear the First Minister. Thank you.
But I point out that the regulation of the arrangements for the Lord Advocate, holding the dual functions of being the Chief Legal Advisor to the Government and the Head of the Prosecution Service, is in the Scotland Act 1998, which is a reserved piece of legislation. Now, if Mr Finlay wants to do something about it, he should support Scotland in becoming an independent country.
Russell Finlay.
Well, the best actor for phony anger goes to Oscar goes to John Swinney. What a desperate deflection! Unbelievable. After 5 years,
let us hear our proceedings.
5 years of inaction, it maybe will take this rotten episode to finally force the SNP to end the Lord Advocate's dual role. This scandal is typical of an SNP government obsessed with secrecy and spin, personified by the First Minister. And if John Swinney really doesn't understand why this stinks, he's in need of a software update. The Lord Advocate's private memo gave John Swinney political
Let's hear one another,
advantage.
colleagues.
The Lord Advocate's private memo gave John Swinney political advantage. He was Nicola Sturgeon's right-hand man, and he got a heads up about the criminal case involving her husband. The Lord Advocate's actions were wrong, and her excuses don't stack up. John Swinney says he's got confidence in her, so will he therefore support our plan to get her back into Parliament to provide a full statement about this shameful, rotten episode?
First Minister.
Parliament decided on that point last night in a democratic vote by the elected members of Parliament. Yesterday, Mr Finlay put on the record all of his points to the Lord Advocate. There were, I think, 14 members able to ask questions of the Lord Advocate in an extended urgent question that was before Parliament. And this morning on the radio, Thomas Ross KC said this: "I hope that now everything's calmed down, the Scottish Conservatives are big enough to apologise for making that slur, which is the slur against the Lord Advocate, because being trusted is the most important thing for every lawyer in the country. And for somebody who is trusted, the Lord Advocate, to be accused in some way of dishonesty, I thought was shameful." And I agree with Mr Ross, because I was disgusted by the behaviour of Russell Finlay and a number of other contributors in Parliament yesterday. I think it was the most appalling level of behaviour that was deployed by members of Parliament. We've got a code of conduct and some standards to hold in this Parliament.
Thank you. Thank you. You will stop shouting. Continue, First Minister. Let us hear one another.
And the shouting and bawling from the Conservatives demonstrates my point, that they don't deserve to be here, and they won't be here because they're on their way out at the forthcoming election.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week we learned that the Lord Advocate disclosed to John Swinney information about the prosecution of Peter Murrell that was not in the public domain. Over the years, we have seen the SNP apply pressure to institutions to get the outcome it wants, regardless of consequences. We saw it at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, where pressure was applied to open early and people died. So can I ask John Swinney, so this is on the official record for future reference, did the First Minister, anyone acting on his behalf, or any SNP adviser ask the Lord Advocate or any of her advisers at any point to be updated on the prosecution of Peter Murrell?
First Minister.
No.
Anna Sarwar.
I thank the First Minister for putting that on the record for future reference. It was the answer I was expecting, but let's see in the cold light of day where that goes. Presiding Officer, yesterday...
Let's hear Mr Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, yesterday... Really? I would just remind the Deputy First Minister and the Finance Secretary that there have been incidents before where members have misled this Parliament. So I'd be very, very careful about what they say. Presiding Officer, yesterday the Lord Advocate appeared to give inaccurate and contradictory information to this Parliament. She said she had not given John Swinney political advantage because, I quote, "From the point at which an indictment is served, there is no limitation on its terms being made public." But after the Lord Advocate had notified John Swinney, the Crown Office warned the media, and again I quote, "We have no comment. The indictment is not a public document until it is presented in open court." These two statements cannot both be true. If The Sun hadn't published the story, then the only people who would have known the details of this case before the election would have been the Crown, Peter Murrell, and bizarrely, because the Lord Advocate notified them, John Swinney and his SNP advisers. How is that acceptable and not the very definition of political advantage?
First Minister.
The point the Lord Advocate made yesterday is the minute the indictment is served on the accused, it becomes a public document because it can be made public as a consequence of that. That is why the statement is valid. Now, the reason why this is important and how I have contradicted Mr Sarwar's statement is because of the contents of the Lord Advocate's letter to Mr Sarwar yesterday. It is a damning letter. It says in the letter, in response to our correspondence from Mr Sarwar, and these are the words of the Lord Advocate, "The publication of your letter has put a number of factual errors into the public domain, and it is incumbent on me to correct them quickly and publicly in order to protect the rule of law." That tells us all we need to know. Anna Sarwar, putting factual errors into the public domain, undermining the rule of law. Anna Sarwar is unfit to lead the Labour Party.
Thank you. Mr Kerr, I would ask you to please be quiet. Anna Sarwar.
That's amazing coming out the mouth of John Swinney. These two sentences cannot both be true. From the point at which an indictment is served, there is no limitation on its terms being made public. Alongside that, the indictment is not a public document until it is presented in open court. Two contradictory statements that John Swinney cannot run away from. But there are lots of questions. If the Lord Advocate was recused from this matter, why was she corresponding with John Swinney about it at all? If it was for John Swinney only, why was the information shared with SNP advisers, and who did they tell? Why did the Crown Office refuse to share it with the media when the Lord Advocate told Parliament it was public information? Does he really expect us to believe he needs a specific warning from the Lord Advocate to give his favourite excuse? It's just not credible. So will he confirm that after he leaked this information to SNP political advisers, none of it was passed on in any form?
Mr Sarwar.
Was it passed on in any form to any other SNP politician or party official? But isn't the truth that this is just the latest episode of an SNP government with a rotten culture at its heart, where John Swinney and the SNP will always put their own party before Scotland?
First Minister.
What this is evidence of is Mr Sarwar's desperation. Absolutely. And it's becoming clear that as every week goes by, Mr Sarwar is getting more and more desperate about everything that he does. Now, in order for me to answer directly the point that Mr Sarwar has put to me, it is a matter of public record, the individuals to whom the information that was shared with me by the Lord Advocate was passed to. And that was all that it was passed to enable those who speak on my behalf to be able to follow the Lord Advocate's guidance. Now, the reason, so I've given a direct answer to Anas Sarwar, and I hope he's got the decency to accept the direct answer that I've given him. But I don't think he has, because week by week Mr Sarwar comes here and he attacks somebody's character. He comes here regularly and attacks my character. Yesterday, he didn't even have the guts to come here and say to the Lord Advocate's face the things he put, which prompted her in a letter, which prompted her to say that he was undermining the rule of law by his actions. That is somebody unfit to lead a political party. Now, why is Mr Sarwar desperate? He's desperate because he knows for all his efforts, his political ambitions are going absolutely nowhere. He's told the people of this country for years, back Starmer. He now wants us to believe that he wants Starmer out so that somehow the country can progress. Well, while Anas Sarwar goes around smearing individuals, undermining their character, I'm going to carry on supporting members of the public by reducing waiting times, opening GP walk-in clinics, keeping unemployment low and making sure that child poverty falls in Scotland. That's an SNP government delivering, and Anas Sarwar is finished.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, it's now been 6 weeks since I asked the First Minister about Margaret McGill. She's been ready to leave hospital for a year, but the lack of available carers means that she is still stuck there. Her husband, Cathal, says the First Minister is welcome to visit them anytime, because it seems she is not going anywhere. Turning to education, today the Scottish Liberal Democrats are publishing figures which show that a record 400 recent graduates left teaching last year. Why, under the SNP, are people who are ready and raring to teach, who have grafted for their qualifications, being forced out of Scottish education altogether?
First Minister.
On the case of Margaret McGill, I've discussed this issue with Mr Cole-Hamilton before, and I would be happy to visit Mr and Mrs McGill. I'd be delighted to do so should the opportunity arise. The issue is about the availability of particular carer support within the community, and as I've rehearsed with Mr Cole-Hamilton on a number of occasions, there are challenges in the availability of staff to undertake that support, but I reaffirm my commitment and my willingness to try to do all that we can to address that issue. Now, in relation to the question of teaching, I want to make sure that we have strong opportunities for members of the teaching profession. That's exactly what is the focus of the work that is undertaken by the Scottish Government, to ensure that we have appropriate employment and opportunities available, and that these are spread throughout the country to make sure that they meet the needs and the aspirations of individuals.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
To say, Presiding Officer, that it seems that the First Minister has done absolutely nothing for Margaret McGill and getting her out of hospital in the 6 weeks since I first raised it. Under the SNP, 3/4 of newly qualified teachers can't get full-time contracts they need to pay the bills or get a mortgage. It's absolutely brutal. One graduate has been stuck on supply lists for 9 years, racking up tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. He even tried to take his own life. Many more are being forced to work abroad when they want to teach here. It is an actual brain drain. Why can't the First Minister admit that his government has made an absolute pig's ear of this, and that tens of thousands of teachers are paying the price?
First Minister.
Well, I don't agree with that characterisation. What I'd say to Mr Cole-Hamilton is that there has been an increase in post-probation employment in the last year, which is welcome. And also that in Scotland we have a higher number of teachers per 100,000 pupils than in any other part of the United Kingdom. So there's by a significant margin actually, there's 7,584 teachers per 100,000 pupils in Scotland, compared to 5,551 in England and 5,301 in Wales. That also leads to a much lower pupil-teacher ratio in Scotland of 13.2 pupils per teacher in Scotland, compared to 18 in England and 18.9 in Wales. So the government is supporting a much larger teaching profession within Scotland, because we think that's important for it to be the case. And we'll continue to do that as part of the budget proposals that we've put forward, which of course Mr Cole-Hamilton and his colleagues supported, and I'm very grateful to them for their support in that respect.
Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what measures the Scottish Government is taking to standardise the criteria for urgent referrals to child and adolescent mental health services for an assessment in light of reports that it is currently a postcode lottery.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the National Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services specification sets a consistent national standard requiring boards to ensure that children and young people receive timely support appropriate to their needs. Children and young people are added to waiting lists and seen in order of clinical need. Decisions on urgent referrals must follow clinical judgment, ensuring fair and proportionate responses across Scotland. CAM's performance has been met for the past year, with 91.5% of young people starting treatment within 18 weeks. We continue to support boards to further improve access and to ensure services remain safe, person-centred and consistent.
Christine Graham.
Thank the First Minister for his answer, and I agree it should follow clinical judgment. However, my question was prompted by a constituency case involving a child who exhibits extreme behaviour at home, behaviour which is deteriorating. She masks this at school and in public, so the school will not and cannot make an urgent referral. At home, this increasingly violent behaviour to family, self-harm, impacts seriously on her twin sister, who is mimicking that behaviour, and I am most concerned about her mother's health. She has a heart condition, and frankly, she's at breaking point. This girl has waited since June 2023 for a CAMS assessment and now is further down the waiting list after 3 years. That cannot be right, and she may not be the only case. So, the First Minister agrees with me that urgency should be the behaviour, the self-harm and the harm to others, and not the locus. But it does appear to be the locus in this case. And as I've anonymised it, may I send more details, because I've abbreviated this, to the Cabinet Secretary for Health so that he can have a look into this case, please?
First Minister.
I sympathise very much with the details that Christine Graham has put on the record, and I would reassure her by the point about clinical judgment being made, that where that should be applied in all cases. And the CAMS, so it's difficult for me to make judgments in the absence of detailed knowledge about the case. But CAM's performance has been met for the past year, with 91.5% of young people starting treatment within 18 weeks. But if Christine Graham would be so good as to write to the Health Secretary, we will explore the particular case and see if there is more that can be done to consider the questions of clinical judgment that have been applied here. But they're difficult for me to respond to at this particular moment.
Ros McCall at question number 5.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that hundreds of teachers have sought medical treatment following attacks by pupils in the last 5 years.
First Minister.
President, so there is no place for violence in Scotland's schools. Any incident that results in staff requiring medical treatment is deeply concerning. While most young people behave well, we recognise the challenges staff face. We have published guidance on consequences and risk assessments for violent behaviour as part of our joint national action plan with COSLA. That guidance, developed with teaching unions and head teachers, prioritises safety and confirms exclusion remains available as a last resort. Our approach to tackling violent behaviour, including in schools, focuses on early intervention and prevention and is backed with over £6 million invested since 2023.
Ros McCall.
I thank the First Minister for that answer, but no one should have to go to work afraid that at any given day it will result in assault needing medical attention. But that's what's happening in Scottish schools. In the last 5 years, more than 5,200 incidents of pupil violence were recorded where teaching staff required medical treatment, with at least 225 attending hospital or their GP. And we know that Scotland has the worst rate of violent injuries to school staff anywhere in the UK. So right now, teaching staff and other pupils fear they will be next to be attacked. So will the First Minister explain what will it take to finally prioritise their safety, restore discipline and take responsibility for this failure to act?
First Minister.
I agree with Ros McCall's fundamental point that nobody should go to work with some fear that they will be exposed to violence. So I agree entirely with that point. And the Government is taking steps through the measures that I set out in my original answer, to ensure that the support is in place in schools on the basis of early intervention and prevention, to de-escalate in particular instances, and to make sure that young people receive the support that they require within schools to address any behavioural issues. Now, there are a range of remedies that are available in the behavioural guidance that's been agreed with local authorities, who are, of course, those who run our schools, and the Government will continue to work with local authorities to ensure that that guidance is applied in full to protect the teaching staff.
Paul O'Kane.
Face physical abuse and violence in the workplace, and there has been a deterioration of behaviour and standards over recent years, and this is the outcome of it. I've spoken to teachers in my region. These are teachers who are telling me that the scaffolding of support that used to sit around children and teachers to support those young people with behavioural problems or other challenges has been hollowed out by this government, by their neglect of education, their lack of leadership and their cuts to local authority budgets. So does the First Minister accept that this behaviour problem hasn't just happened on his watch, but has happened because of his party's failure to support our schools?
First Minister.
No, I don't accept that point. And what the Government has done, the Government has strongly supported investment in education. It has done that consistently. I've just recounted to Mr Cole-Hamilton the fact that in Scotland we have a significantly lower pupil-teacher ratio than exists in other parts of the United Kingdom. We have consistently higher numbers of teachers per head of population than in other parts of the United Kingdom. I also I've set out in my answer to Ros McCall the steps the Government has taken to work with local authorities to put in place the guidance to support our school system. Where I agree with Mr O'Kane, it's the point I agree with Ros McCall. Nobody should be exposed to violence at their place of employment, and that is why the Government has the guidance in place and the resources in place to make sure that can be realised.
Question number 6, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on the development of a just transition plan for the North East of Scotland, including how communities and workers have been engaged.
First Minister.
President Officer, we are committed to a just transition in the North East, with workers and communities at the heart of it. We have already invested £120 million through the Just Transition Fund and the Energy Transition Fund, bringing in even more investment, creating jobs and supporting new ideas. We are also driving forward projects like the Oil and Gas Transition Training Fund and the North East Scotland Investment Zone. Our support is directly aimed to address the needs of local people and businesses. Recent site closures show the need for more proactive planning, so we are refreshing the Joint Transition Planning Framework to support more targeted action and guide a new Just Transition Commission in the next Parliament.
I thank the First Minister for that answer, but my constituents want to know when they will see a plan that responds to the decline of the North Sea Basin. The £500 million Just Transition Fund isn't a strategy, neither is hope. We need a plan that provides jobs and training for oil and gas workers, one that creates the conditions for the development of offshore clean energy, one that supports job creation and economic stability and sustainability of an effective domestic supply chain. Specifically, when will the Scottish Government publish its overarching strategy that draws together existing policy levers, including licensing, procurement and regional planning, that enables the North East to be the powerhouse of our new green economy and that gives workers and communities the future they need and deserve?
First Minister.
I pretty much agree with Maggie Chapman about the requirements for the transition in the North East of Scotland, but it has to be done, and all of that material has been set out by the Government in the various steps that we have taken. It also has to be, the transition has to be managed in an orderly fashion. Now, I happen to take the view, and I was making this point in a telephone call with the Prime Minister earlier on this week, about the importance of us managing the careful balance of the reduction in North Sea oil and gas activity with the upsurge in renewables. I've said to Parliament before, I think oil and gas is contracting too fast because of the issues in relation to the Energy Profits Levy. I encourage the Prime Minister to change course on that in my call with him on Monday. And the upsurge in renewables has not happened as fast as we would like to be the case. So the balanced, orderly approach is what will safeguard livelihoods in the North East of Scotland, and that's what the Scottish Government is committed to doing.
Brief supplementary, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We all want to see a just transition, but Labour's decision to continue the Tories' energy profits levy is being described by the oil and gas industry as taxing the sector to death. We know it's causing hundreds of job losses, and experts are warning that it will cost thousands more, block billions of pounds of potential investment, and undermine the very energy security a just transition relies upon. Does the First Minister agree that the UK Government's reckless approach is sabotaging the chances of a fair and just transition? And can he expand on what his government is doing to support Scotland's energy workers?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I'm certainly making the case to the Prime Minister that the energy profits levy should be ended, and ended now, because it is damaging the transition that we are taking forward. And I've made that point to the Prime Minister now a number of times, and I've repeated it in a call with him earlier on this week. In relation to other steps, we are, of course, as I set out in my original answer to Maggie Chapman, taking forward a number of steps to invest in facilities and in opportunities to develop the new energy sources in the north east of Scotland, and the Government is absolutely committed to that work.
Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding Officer, my constituents are at the cliff edge of this so-called transition. According to this recent Jobs Foundation report, and the truth is the Scottish Government have no just transition plan and no energy strategy, and we have a jobs emergency in the north east. So will the First Minister support oil and gas workers and finally back projects like Rosebank, Jackdaw and Cambo so we can have a managed transition?
First Minister.
Well, I've said a lot in response to some of these points already, Presiding Officer, but on the issue in relation to new developments, I've set out very clearly the Government's position that any new developments must be able to pass a climate compatibility test. And there are a range of different steps the Government is taking, which are taking forward the Just Transition strategy that the Government has set out, which is supporting individuals on the ground with investments in a range of projects, whether that is about the facilities of the Energy Transition Zone or the training support that is in place for oil and gas workers. And the Government will continue to deliver that support in the period to come.
You move to constituency and general supplementaries. Concise responses and questions will enable more members to be taken. I call Jackie Dunbar.
The news that Donald Russell is to close its operations in Inverurie is devastating for the workers and their families across Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City. This is yet another example of a business struggling to cope with sky-high energy costs which have soared on the Labour Government's watch. Does the First Minister share my concerns that businesses in energy-rich Scotland are paying the highest price in broken Brexit Britain? And can I ask the First Minister to commit to engaging with the workforce and trade unions at the earliest opportunity?
First Minister.
President, I'm deeply concerned to hear of the difficulties being faced by Donald Russell. It's a business of exceptional quality and significance within Aberdeenshire, and the Government is supportive of the continued operations of the business. And Richard Lockhead, the Business Minister, is urgently seeking a meeting with the company to understand how the Scottish Government can support them, and will work to try to create a positive outcome. I am acutely aware of the challenging conditions in which businesses are operating because of the increase in employment costs through the employers' national insurance contributions, and also the increased energy costs with which businesses are wrestling. So these are some of the practical and hard realities which are created by the actions of the United Kingdom Government, and that's why we've got to be able to maximise the steps we can take in Scotland, which we have taken, to temper any impact of business rate changes on businesses, to make sure businesses are supported through these difficult times. And that, of course, is integral to the Government's budget.
Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of the unannounced inspection of Sky House in August 2025. I share the Government's concerns of the report findings regarding culture, staff resourcing and the use of restraints and other cruel practices. But the report does not include the journeys of young people and how they entered Sky House in the first place. And I am very concerned that when parents and carers have raised concerns over culture within our NHS and social work departments, they are met with a defensive response and an attempt to shut down concerns without any accountability or willingness to improve services. So will the First Minister now instruct a review of CAMS, NHS boards and social work services to discover how many concerns have been raised in respect to culture, to prevent young people from being failed and ultimately put in institutions that risk causing more harm than good?
First Minister.
I have considerable sympathy with the point that Megan Gallagher puts to me, and the Minister for Social Care and Mental Wellbeing has been in contact already with the Chief Executive of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, requesting an urgent meeting to express the Government's expectations that all 16 formal requirements and 9 areas for improvement at Skye House are implemented swiftly and demonstrably. Now, I accept that there are a number of the reports that emerge in the Skye House report is one of those, which make for very concerning reading. And I want to signal today, in response to Megan Gallagher's point, the importance I attach to these reports being confronted, not just by the organisations that are responsible, but for other organisations delivering comparable services. Because that is the fundamental response that Megan Gallagher requires, that all services must be able to be satisfied that they are not presiding over what has happened and been highlighted in Skye House. So I hope that gives some reassurance to Megan Gallagher that on a case like this, and there's been another case where I instructed the Health Secretary to call in the leadership of Forth Valley NHS to make it clear the Government's expectations about improvement, and that is the culture that I want to preside over. So I'm grateful to Megan Gallagher for raising this issue, because it provides me with an opportunity to signal the importance I attach to these issues being taken properly and seriously by the NHS leadership in Scotland, which Megan Gallagher has a right to expect from those authorities.
Pauline McNeill.
This week, Glasgow and Clyde rape crisis closed their waiting list for 2 specialist services, and the decision comes as a consequence of real-term cuts in the Government's proposed budget to funding for rape and sexual support services. I know I don't need to remind the First Minister that sexual crimes have never been higher, and the data shows that there's been an 11% increase in rapes and attempted rapes. So it is difficult to reconcile the Government's commitment to tackling the epidemic of violence against women and girls with a budget that reduces the real terms value of the service designed to respond to it. In fact, those are the exact words of the Director of the Glasgow service. So how does the First Minister justify a real terms cut of £3.9 million to the Delivering Equally Safe Fund, which they keep telling me in every question I ask that is their core programme for violence against women and girls? So why does the Government believe it is acceptable to withdraw this vital support from women and girls who have experienced rape and sexual violence at a time when the demand for these services continues to rise?
First Minister.
Ministers are actively engaged in dialogue with Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis Centre. This is within a context of an uplift in the Delivering Equally Safe Fund of 12.5% in 25-26, taking total investment in the fund to £21.6 million. Now, I know Sharon Dowie raised with me a couple of weeks ago the issues of the distribution of this funding because, in relation to a project in her own locality. So ministers are exploring the distribution issues to try to address these issues. I hope that provides assurance to Pauline McNeill. The Government is investing substantially in the Equally Safe programme, recognising the demand for this support within the country. There may be issues about the deployment of that around the country, but that is the subject of active discussion with ministers at present.
George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. While Keir Starmer's distracted Labour Party looks the other way on the cost of living crisis, our Scottish Government is freezing rail fares. Can the First Minister tell me how decisions like this are putting money back into the pockets of my hard-working Paisley constituents?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Government is taking every action in Scotland to tackle the cost of living challenges that members of the public face. I was very pleased last week, along with the Transport Secretary, to announce the freezing of rail fares in Scotland for the next financial year. That, of course, comes on top of the decision last September to eliminate peak time rail fares, and that resulted in an average reduction of about 17% on all ScotRail ticket types. But for commuters between Edinburgh and Glasgow, it resulted in a 48% reduction in their commuting cost. So that is a demonstrable evidence of the Scottish Government acting to tackle the cost of living pressures that are faced by members of the public, and I commit to Mr Adam and to Parliament that the Government will do as much as it can to support householders in these difficult days.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. 12 months ago, I warned this Parliament that the Highland Health Board were intentionally, and according to our vascular surgeon, running down care provision in the Highlands. Presiding Officer, last week, the First Minister told the Inverness Courier that it's acceptable for Highlanders to have to travel up to 4 hours to Perth and Aberdeen to access treatment, simply because there isn't a lack of critical mass of cases in the Highlands. First Minister, given the success of the National Treatment Centre in Inverness, which I applaud, will your government focus on delivering specialist care at Raigmore so that Highlanders can get treatment close to their homes and families?
First Minister.
I've not seen the press commentary that Mr Mountain puts, but obviously I spoke to a representative of the Inverness Courier at the weekend when I was visiting the Sutherland area with my colleague Marie Todd. But I'll go and look at those remarks to see how they've been set out. But fundamentally, the point I was making, which I think Mr Mountain will understand, is that when it comes to the sustainability of clinical services, there requires to be a certain level of active delivery of cases in that area to sustain clinical safety. And we want to maximise the delivery of services in as many localities as we possibly can, but they have to be clinically safe. And we will work to try to do that in all localities. Mr Mountain made reference to, in his question to me, about the strength of the National Treatment Centre. It's an outstanding asset that is delivering care to patients, not just in the Highlands, but delivering care to patients in the Perthshire areas that I represent and in other parts of the country as well. So we are taking decisions to try to make sure there is effective deployment of clinical services, but they have to be done on a safe basis, and that underpins the decisions the Government takes.
Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week, Scotland reached a milestone as more than 50,000 households received support to live in a warmer home, which are now cheaper to heat. Meanwhile, the SNP Scottish Government published plans which could mean that communities across Scotland see more money invested in their area as a result of onshore renewable energy developments. Can the First Minister tell us what action he is taking to tackle fuel poverty? And does he agree that only through the Fresh Start, with independence, can we use Scotland's energy to create a wealthier and fairer Scotland?
First Minister.
The Government continues to use the powers that we have to raise incomes and improve energy efficiency, including increased funding for Warmer Homes Scotland, investing over £197 million in our winter heating benefits and providing a further £1 million this year to expand energy bill debt advice services. So we are doing everything we can within the budget, and I'm glad the budget is progressing through Parliament to enable us to do that. However, there is a contradiction in Scotland, which is an energy-rich country that also has high levels of fuel poverty. So I agree with my colleague that it is important that Scotland's energy wealth works for the people of Scotland, and we can only achieve that with a fresh start of independence.
And Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In England, £26 billion of investment will make 90% of keyhole surgery robotic assisted by 2035, expanding access to 9 out of 10 patients and cutting waiting lists. In Scotland, there is no national strategy, there is no timetable, and there has not even been a completed review of the current robotic capacity across our NHS, despite the First Minister promising last year to expand access. Robotic procedures released more than 11,000 bed days back into our NHS in 2025 alone. Waiting lists are soaring. Women are waiting years for gynaecological procedures, and 20 minutes across the border in Carlisle, patients will soon have better access than those here in Scotland. When will the First Minister stop the delay and deliver a clear, funded national plan to expand robotic surgery in Scotland?
First Minister.
Let me just correct some of what Sue Webber said. The operation numbers in Scotland are up, outpatient waits are down, inpatient and day case waits are down, and the Government is taking forward an investment strategy which is designed to ensure our National Health Service is fit for the future. That is what the planning work that is going on throughout Scotland is all about. That's why we're delivering an increased number of operations, and I look forward to continuing that work in the months and the years to come to make sure the National Health Service delivers for the people of Scotland under a strong SNP government.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. Our next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Alexander Burnett. There will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.
Okay, if I could ask those leaving the public gallery to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible as we proceed to the next item of business, which is a members' business debate on motion 20268 in the name of Alexander Burnett on fair share of funding for public services. The debate will be concluded without any questions being posed. I would invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons and invite Alexander Burnett to open the debate around 7 minutes. Mr Burnett.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to those who supported this motion, which echoes a joint statement put out by 22 community councils in Aberdeenshire. Because for 19 years, Scotland has struggled under the SNP. Our councils are underfunded, education standards are slipping, rural nurseries and primary schools are closing, our roads are full of potholes, our bridges are crumbling, and our NHS is at breaking point. Yet Scotland is the highest tax part of the UK, and we need a government that will focus on Scotland's priorities. Because for years there have been repeated calls for the SNP to provide more funding to support local services. Our councils are stretched thin, all whilst the Scottish Government received the largest settlement of £50 billion from Westminster. But the SNP budget for 26-27 falls £1 billion short of what COSLA called for, and fails to deliver COSLA's demand
down on the floor, are we?
It's quite comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
I won't be able to crowd.
Yep. How are we? Not too bad, you good? Usual suspects? No, I'm in jail. Very well. It's always as soon as Sing the song. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't brought my stuff to if they'll do it.
We said don't be driving, just get it. He said just send it all over so we have to see it. And you have to do the rest.
Manslaughter, sorry, excuse me. Manslaughter. Yeah. One of them got. Manslaughter's the last one, isn't it? Yeah, and one of them got. Three of them, one of them got. Yeah, one of them got life. But got long sentences. Long sentences. Yeah, one was 13, one was 23. Just the main money, isn't it? Take care of people, you stop the game. I know, yeah. Good. Our Yorkshire reporter's been diverted to HMP Leeds because Princess Anne's doing a visit to all places.
Is that some good head?
Testing.
When that fella fell asleep. Yes, I was there for that. I don't know who he was with, or he was the one who fell asleep. Oh, Richard was on the last now. Who's the one? He was on it. He was behind us, and I thought he was behind us. Initially, I thought something really slow. It wasn't like an out-and-out slow. It was like and then just that one of the family, I can remember, and then some of the Yes. Well, to be honest, I wanted them to just come out and go straight into it, Mark. Yeah. I was just checking you lot were ready. Yeah. Well, are any planning on just filming them walking out, or can we set up?
They'll put it away before you walk out. Put it
Good to do that. All right.
We can be back when you finish. You did that for me. I'll wait for you.
All right.
Sorry. What's happened here? I just went in cadre, I see. Okay, that means secret. I'm on live now?
Not now.
No.
People are coming out now.
Yeah. So who's coming out? Something's important? What you can say? Yeah, no, this is cool. And as we see the news, what is that? So what's happened?
They're coming out now.
Please. For what?
I should be talking like this, like a policeman thing.
Okay, are we ready? Good afternoon everybody, I'm Detective Chief Inspector Steve McGrath, Senior Investigating Officer from Merseyside Police. The events of last July were absolutely tragic and have been made more difficult for everybody affected by the trial by having gone through the ordeal of a full trial. Eric Greener and Sheila Jackson were a well-loved couple in the St Helens community. Despite having no connections to the dispute which had arisen, Eric and Sheila found themselves trapped at home as Owens and Smith launched their fatal arson attack. The fear and suffering that they must